Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Nagendra. Nagendra, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ben, for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. Today's going to be a fun subject. Going through this beforehand, I got really excited for this conversation, but we're going to make you wait for just 1 second as listeners. But Nagendra, let's get to know you. Tell us about your career. And then the question we ask everyone, why do you love content and marketing?
Okay, great. Just to give you a little, 50,000 foot view about me, of who I am. I have spent about 20 years in consulting. And when I say consulting, I've been primarily very focused on a larger part of my time is data analytics. Within the industries, I've spent maybe about 16, 17 years in financial services, and then the other industries like CPG, retail, QSRs. But for some reason, I've always, with the advent of content, started to get very excited about it, right? Remember my early days of my technology years, all you could do is pick up a magazine or a technology magazine and read something about it. It wasn't there as it is today. I sometimes feel that it's sometimes overload, but I think so. What I really enjoy about it is it allows you to pick and choose and stay abreast with what's happening.
I love that. And that's such a good definition of what the value of content is. All right. Diving into the subject that I'm really excited to discuss is really, it's kind of hard to explain, but really what we're going to focus on is making the right kind of content for the right reason. Nagendra, what is the right kind of content? And how do you actually provide value with it?
Great question. I look at this way, Ben, that first you have to be very clear of why are you really even creating a content, right? Number one. And like what they say in the rule of communication, they say, right? Know your audience. So it's very important that if you are preparing a content, and doesn't matter what form of a content it is, like a webinar or a podcast or a POV or a white paper, whatever it is, right? I feel what is more important is know your audience. And what do I mean by that is having that clarity of day in a life of that audience, right? What does keep them up in the night? What are they trying to solve in the day of their life? And I said in the day of their life is, I'm talking purely the professional, right? You have these personas you are addressing your content to. So I feel that is very important, because what I tend to see in a lot of content is their initial objective is to help or provide that value, but eventually somewhere they give into that little being salesy and little being, oh, let me give this information of how good our company is or our product is or our service is. And what they really lose is you've now literally moved away from value unknowingly to selling. And why am I saying that is important is because the personas you're trying to target are people who are probably getting 300 to 500 emails a day. So if you are not adding value to them, for them to very quickly ignore you is much easier, right? Because as I said, too much noise, right? They're looking for voice, not noise. It's important that you know what you're putting out there.
I think that's great. When we were talking before, you mentioned this really powerful statement of everyone can find information. Maybe walk us through that, because I thought that was pretty profound. I'd love to hear more about that.
Sure, absolutely. This is one of my very favorite speaker and author, Daniel H. Pink, wrote in a book called To Sell is Human, right? He talked about, he was on stage in one of the events I was there. That's the first time I met him. And he made a beautiful statement. He said, everybody close your eyes. And he said, think of a salesperson. And everybody talked about a man in a suit with a black tie and a briefcase, And then the second thing he said was, whatever you say, you're in the 20th, 21st century now, but you know how your mind works in that old way of selling, right? That's what you think. And what most sellers forget, that our audience has become very smart now. So the information, what you're trying to give them, is very readily available for them. So I made a comment on saying even a grandmother could literally go to buy a car and she probably may know what the prices in all the close by car stores are, right? So information is readily available, but now how do you change that information into value is you custom make it, because content cannot be, they say, right, it fits every size. No, it cannot. It has to be custom. You have to literally focus on the target audience and say what do they need, and then build your content, because that's when it becomes more powerful.
I love that. So just to summarize for myself to understand this, and this is one of the reasons I love the podcast, because I get to learn firsthand and pick smart people's brains like yours. When you're talking about information and it's so readily available, it sounds like it's generic, and value is information that is specific to me. You talked about knowing the audience and everything, but it's that information from my point of view and what I need exactly. Is that how you kind of view value?
Yeah. And I also say something to people that difference between information and valuable information is the experience of actions taken behind it. So when you are targeting an audience and you are giving them just an information, you're telling what is readily available. But when you make it a value information, you now start to give them experiences of what you have been through with a lot of customers who are trying to solve the same problem. And once people hear that, they go, hey, you know what? I resonate with this content. It is just like going to a doctor for the first time in a new city. Let's say you move to a new city and you go to a doctor and you go and sit down in front of the doctor, and the doctor is trying to check you, and he's going through the stethoscope, and suddenly he puts it around your chest or wherever, and he suddenly says, hey, seems like you have a congestion and you have this congestion for X number of weeks. And you are in your mind thinking, how the heck he knows about it? So what the doctor did for you was created a credibility, right? You already knew you had congestion. That was not a problem. But what got you very excited was that he figured out what your problem was, and he could kind of tell you how many weeks you've been having it. So now you're resonating, right? The doctors are resonating with the patients. Now get what happens. That patient gets locked in for the rest of their life with that doc. So I feel those are the kind of hooks you need in your content, which can resonate with people. So now they're actually looking forward to your next content.
That is so powerful. I love that analogy. That story is so spot on. I love how well it articulates it, that if you can understand their problem, there's that value. So here's my next question. How do we get really good at understanding the buyer and the buyer's persona so well that I can hone in on their problems enough to create content that actually provides value? How do we actually do that?
See, there are multiple ways, and I'll be very little bit tactical here, right? I don't want to be very strategic because I want to have people know how to execute it, right? So I'll give you an example. When I started to build go-to-market strategies for companies, probably around 5 years ago, right? What I really started to do was I said, how do I know that my go-to-market for the consulting company I'm working for will work for my audience? It'll only work for the audience if I really take time out and talk to the audience enough number of times before I start throwing the content at them. Make sense? So what I really did was I built my own campaign of reaching out to all the leaders, the corporate leaders in that area. And I would literally reach out to them through LinkedIn and say, hey, can I have 10 minutes of your time? I am actually setting up a strategy for a consulting company and wanting to understand what are the biggest pain points in the market in the data analytics space. Now, did everybody say yes to talk to me? Not, probably not, right? But what I really started to do was I started to gather these data points. So I went through middle management, I went through senior management, I went through executive management. Then at the same time, I had my own network of people. So I actually started setting up coffee times with them. And this was obviously prior to pandemic, so it was easy for me to go and meet them. So I was doing it. But what it did was twofold. One, I started to understand what content would work for them, number one, right? I'm trying to understand the buyer's persona. Number two, guess what I did with myself? I already created an audience which was waiting for me to start a content process for them. because they was like, Nagendra, if you're doing this and you're talking to so many people, hey, once you are ready with this, I would love to have that report.
Yeah.
I would like to know what other data analytics leaders are thinking about, what are they getting bothered by. So that was one tactical way, right? That is one. The second part of how do you do that is you start to really understand what I usually call it the business capability matrix, right? Each organization has these capabilities, which are called the lines of businesses. Start to understand how these lines of businesses function. Who are the personas who are functioning these, running these? And read enough to understand what kind of concerns these personas face. No, and I would say it's easier said than done. It's a pretty how do I say? It's a very boring long-term effort to build that, right? But what happens is that your content starts to resonate with much larger people. Then it becomes the checklist which that executive has asked his assistant to filter it out from his email.
100%. So as you are going through this process, you mentioned very early on this concept of moving away from a seller's mindset into a buyer's mindset. Sometimes businesses are going to be hesitant to do that because they feel like their conversion rates and all of the data points and the revenue might go down. What advice would you give to individuals in marketing that they know that this is the right way of doing content? They're just afraid of maybe some of those internal conversations when they talk about value-driven content instead of selling content. How would you approach that?
See, I look at this way. If you understand a consulting or a product company, their end objective is to sell, right? That, hey, somebody comes and buys my product, gives me the license value, I improve my ARR, right? All that stuff is great. I always tell people that content marketing should not be the only iron in the fire. It should be one of the irons in the fire, so that you are now not getting uncomfortable of saying that this is going to take time for me to get my deals. So what I always tell people is that I even tell sometimes people that don't stop cold calling. That's another another iron in the fire. Why do you want to leave that, right? But at the same time, so understand that each line, each iron you're putting, like content marketing, you may be hosting a lot of events. You may be doing a lot of stuff, right? Each of them, let them run at a different speed, because content marketing is primarily a crockpot. It's not a microwave. Now you may say, why do I need a crockpot? Hey, question to you: if you want to eat a nice grilled chicken, would you put it in a microwave or would you put it in a crockpot?
Crockpot.
Right? So you know that something well cooked will take its own time. Now that does not mean that you stop doing what is quicker and easier. Let that be another process of yours running into it, so that now you are now not saying, oh my God, I'm sitting and nothing is happening, right? You see what I'm saying? Because content marketing, when you start, you know better, Ben, that it takes time. You can do all the SEO optimizations you want,
Yep.
but it takes its own time to percolate, right? It's like a coffee. It takes its own time to percolate to make a good coffee. So I feel that's something is what I tell people, that don't put all your eggs in one basket that way.
I love the kitchen analogy. I've never heard that before. And you're right. There's different tools and resources in the kitchen that have different purposes, different time lengths, all that kind of stuff. It's the perfect analogy for marketing. It doesn't, just because you have a crock pot, you don't throw away the microwave. But at the same time, content doesn't taste very good if you microwave it. You got to put it in the crock pot. You got to let it go and go through that process. I think that's money. Makes me hungry, to be honest. I just had lunch and I'm still hungry because of that. I love it. Well, Nagendra, we are out of time, but this is an amazing conversation. I'm sure people will have questions that would want to reach out. How and where can they find you online?
They can literally search me out on LinkedIn, Nagendra Sherman. I always joke with people, right? Nagendra and Sherman is a combination you won't find much. So easy to find me on LinkedIn, and happy to address any questions, any guidance people need. Would love to do.
Love it. Well, again, Nagendra, thank you so much for your time and insights today. This is an awesome episode, and it gives me a lot to think about. So have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Ben, for having me on this show. And I'm very, very excited to be talking what you asked me. And I hope I was able to add value here.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.